Here is a project presentation in 2D animation. Project number 2, the perpetual bounce. Every animator begins with the bouncing ball. This project has so many aspects of animation that you will use in every project and pretty much forever. The spacing and timing have been worked out for you in the charts provided, so please make sure to use them. And in this next segment, I'll show you how. So I'm getting ready to get started with project number 2 and the crazy bounce. I like to work over my center pegs to center my work, and for good staging I've dropped down from the top of the paper a little bit just so I'm not working right to the very edge. I'm giving myself a center line to work with and then figuring out ground plane. This is my number 1. Okay. Once I figure out the first key, since I'm working pose to pose, I'm going to figure out the lowest point now and actually create an in-between next, because this number 11 is on the ground before it compresses. So I'm going to create and set up this relationship. But if I flip the two drawings, I can't see anything happening. So I'm going to pull the paper off of the pegs and line up the drawings as if they're going to act in place. Make sure to line up the edge of the paper, and be careful about this, and then flip it back and forth to check your volumes. Alright, now you don't want to trace number 1, but you're really looking to make sure that the volumes are consistent. Since we're working pose to pose, we're relating the drawings to each other. Okay, once that's set, put that back on there, and now I'm ready to actually create my other key, number 13, the squash. And now I'm ready to create the extreme. Alright, redrawing kind of my ground plane and then coming down about 1/3 of the way. One thing to remember is the shape of the squash is actually really important as well. Remember, you're giving visual clues as to what this thing is made out of. You don't want to squash it flat, kind of like a pancake, because again, that shows that it's really super gooey. It's not, a red rubber ball. You also want to avoid being a little bit more square, kind of like a loaf of bread or something. Okay, you don't want to square it off. It's not a football. You want to remind them that it is a sphere, so you're going to keep it round, and it's a sphere that's being compressed. Okay, so if I'm going to be squashing it about 1/3 of the way down, what I want to do is think about this volume that I have to displace and then put it off to the sides. Alright, the bottom of course is going to be flattened because we're showing the ground plane, but I'm going to just remember to keep that kind of round. Now I want to make sure to check from 11 to 13 that it looks like the ball is compressing, not growing or shrinking. So I'm just going to check that volume real quick. Alright, and that looks pretty good. So next, just for clarification, what I'm going to do is actually draw everything on one sheet, so it's easier to see as I draw out and work on the charts. So I'm going to just draw in number 1 and then draw in 13, the squash, and just put everything on one sheet. Again, it's easier to see. Okay. Okay. So now that I have, this is highest position, lowest position, I'm going to give myself these paths of action or guides, again using the center line. You don't want this thing wobbling all over the place. You want it working straight up and down. Okay, so between 1 and 13, or 1 in the ground, I'm going to figure out my breakdown, which is 7. That's a halfway position, and draw in my sphere within this path that I've created, almost like a glass cylinder. Okay, so if I'm looking at the chart, halfway between 1 and 7, the half position between that is number 5. If it helps you, give yourself these center lines to help you visually connect and find that halfway position. Alright, construction lines, anything like that, whatever works, right? So between 1 and 5, the halfway position is 3. Give myself a center line, and I'm going to draw in that sphere there. See how the gaps are gradually getting smaller and smaller? I'm creating this slow out. Another way to help you find the half is if you darken the top of the sphere a little bit. Alright, looking at that, maybe visually you can find that half a little bit easier. Right, that's another little trick. Okay, created that slow out. And next what I want to do is finish the timing for this drop. All right, it's slowing out and quickly moving down, and between 7 and the ground, halfway position is number 9, because you can see that's a pretty big gap there. I want to fill that in, so it's still going to be a little bit faster, but not such a big pop. Okay, so there's the timing for the drop. I slow out and quickly hit the ground to contact the ground and then compress and the squash. Okay. So next I'm ready to work out the timing for the rebound. And what I'll do is I'll draw that on another sheet. So it's going to be a little bit easier to see, just for clarification's sake. Okay, so I'm going to redraw the squash and also redraw my number 1, because I'm working from that key, 13, back into number 1. But remember, you do not have to redraw them. You do not need 2 number 1s or 2 number 13s. You only need to do one of them. They've already been drawn, or you will make them and then work into and out of them. Okay, so for the rebound, I'm just going to get rid of this extra sheet here, just again, so it's easier to see. Okay, so the timing, we're working back into 13 to number 1. Let's take a look at that chart. I've kind of drawn one out here for you. Since we're kind of new to reading charts, we always read a chart from top to bottom no matter what's happening. So between 13, that's the ground, and moving into the air, number 1, it can be a little confusing because look at the spacing. Doesn't it look like we're accelerating and then slowing down to the ground, right? Some people get a little confused by this. So if this happens, all right, what I suggest is turning the chart upside down, all right, or thinking about it upside down. Okay. So what I'm going to do is flip this over so we can actually visually connect and relate them to each other. So 13 is on the ground, and then we're going to accelerate up and slow into number 1. All right. So it's just to help you out. You don't have to do it. If you're following the numbers, following the progressions, that's normally how we read a chart from top to bottom. We're going to figure out this timing. Okay, so I'm going to set that aside, keeping it off to my one side so I can figure out this the spacing. All right, so what I have to do first is figure out my breakdown. And the chart's calling for another half, but what we don't want to do in 2D animation especially is we do not want to replace one drawing for the other. 7 is the halfway position in this animation. We've already established that, so what we want to do for number 17 is actually put it slightly above, just slightly above where number 7 is. What happens is our persistence of vision kicks in, and we'll see those drawings in the same place if we put one drawing in the same place as another. So what I'm going to do is put my number 7 down to draw 17 and put it just slightly above. The reason I'm doing above is actually I want to help my slow in into number 1, so I'm going to raise that up a little bit higher. So now that I have that, I just draw it in, and then I can follow the chart like normal. Okay. So 17 is the half, and so now what I'm going to create is my stretch drawing. So between 13 and 17, halfway is the stretch. I'm going to say this a bunch of times, but 15, the stretch, is off the ground. Okay, so I'm going to find the middle position and draw in a more elongated shape. It's just a little bit too high. Make sure you're doing it about the half. Going to get a nice spring to it, and look at it. It's off the ground, off the ground. Okay, it's between 17 and number 1. I'm going to create that slow in. I'm going to find the halfway position and draw those construction lines in if they help you. And here's 19. Between 19 and 1, I have 2 more drawings. Halfway is 21. Okay, and the next drawing, the last drawing, halfway between 1 and 21 is going to be 23, and this is really important. 23 is still moving into number 1, so use the top of those spheres to help you find that half, because you don't want 23 in the same place as number 1. 23 is still in betweening, it's still a half. You don't want it to be the same as number 1, because that would mean the ball is in the same position for 4 frames. It'll just stick there. Okay, so 23 goes halfway. Alright, so here's the timing for the rebound. I'm quickly rebounding with lots of energy, nice springy bounce, and slowing down into the upper position. So I just want to double check with you how many drawings are in this project. Okay, how many we're going to create? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Notice I didn't count those keys twice. We only need one number 1 and one number 13. So there's the timing for the bouncing ball. So these are the project requirements. Please animate a bouncing sphere, kind of the average red rubber ball, in place. Please follow the charts. This is kind of a test to see if you can follow the timing and spacing to create this cycle. It is 12 drawings total, 2 frames each. And of course, the details for the project can be found in the project overview document as well as the 2DA manual. That is the setup for Project 2. Thanks for listening. Let's get drawing.